How's it going, everyone? College Lefty, and in this video I'm going to be ranking the top 10 players at each position, so let's go ahead and get right into it. And as we close in on Season 3, a lot of people's teams are going to look significantly different from where they're at right now. So I wanted to kind of go over some of the Set 1 and 2 cards ranked. I'm going to be going through a lot of these players pretty quickly. We're starting off with Craig Biggio and Will Smith. The difficulty will definitely make a difference, right? If I was playing on All-Star difficulty over Hall of Fame, I might go ahead and select somebody like Jimmy Fox to be in that 9 or 10 spot. But with that being said, a lot of these players have been on the list for quite some time now. Some of them have been, adjustable. A lot of them are, the best players at their respective positions, so they are kind of interchangeable, or at least, maybe 1 or 2 spots, maybe 3 or 4 spots. You could kind of bump them up or down depending on your personal preference, depending on which types of players you like to use. For example, I have Kensuke Kondo at number 2, and I've had him, in the top 3 for catchers for pretty much the entirety of the game cycle. I really like that card. I like the fact that he's a 5'8" player. He plays really well above his attributes. I think he would be a higher overall if he was a primary catcher. But we do have some new additions to the list as well. Miguel Cabrera, Freddie Freeman, Ralph Kiner. These are guys that I would consider using at first base, but because I have some of these better cards, I would not use them necessarily. But I still think they're top 10 options, or at least top options available, right? There's probably another 10 to 15 cards that you could make an argument or a case for them to be better or just as equal to some of the players that I have listed here in the top 10. But as we kind of round out the end of the first baseman list, I've been using Stan Musial or Babe Ruth at first base. I had in my last video, those were the 2 only cards that listed at first base just because I have both of them, and those are, to me, the best 2 options. As we get into second base, I did list an 11th option there for Luis Arraez. I think he is definitely a contact hitter, but one of the better ones in the entirety of the game. We also have the Flying Dutchman. We got Honus Wagner on there. We got Wander Franco. Some of these cards are set 2 players, and they will be on my starting lineup once Season 3 rolls around, depending on which cards are released, of course. But I'm kind of already starting to build my team when Set 1 players are no longer usable, right? You might have maybe a core or 2 players ranked slightly higher in terms of value because you'll be able to use them for a longer period of time. And I think that's a valid reason to maybe rank, one of these guys like Chase Utley higher than Trey Turner. I think, I would personally rather use Trey Turner. I wish I could use him throughout the entirety of the game cycle, but that just won't be the case. We'll have to wait until he gets another upgrade or another card somewhere along the line. But with that being said, I still think a lot of the Set 1 players are just as good, if not better, than a lot of the most recent cards we've gotten. It seems like we've gotten a lot more contact hitters, maybe not as many, maxed out 125 power guys. Obviously, we haven't had a home run derby pack with Set 2. We haven't had some of the same things we had released during Set 1. And we also have to keep in mind that as the year goes on, they're more likely to release players that are at an attribute level above a 99 to where, maybe a guy like this, Trey Turner, is probably at more of like 105 overall. They're more likely to release like retro finest cards, players like Chipper Jones and players like David Wright that have completely juiced out attributes as more of a regularity, right? Rather than just being exclusive to chase packs or exclusive to packs in general, rare rounds of packs, or World Series Battle Royale rewards, or I guess collections, whether they're, set collections or core collections. We should expect to see, more well-rounded players. But as we get into the top third basemen in the game, you're going to see a lot of repeats. You're going to see a lot of the same players that were listed as second baseman or shortstops. But with that being said, right, I think having David Wright at shortstop right now is a better play than having Chipper Jones at shortstop. That's why I kind of rank them, or at least flip the rankings for shortstop and third base. As you can see, for third baseman, Chipper Jones is the number 1 player just because you don't really want to take a reaction hit if you don't have to. You don't want to take a fielding attribute hit if you don't have to. David Wright should have, 85 reaction and 90-something fielding at both positions, so that'll be pretty solid. As we get into the outfielders, you might be wondering why Lou Brock is on this list. I really think Lou Brock is probably one of the most underrated 97 overall cards in the game. I think he is pretty close to a top 10 option for the outfield. You can put him in left, center, or right. He's more of a budget player, but he just plays well above his attributes. You can bunt, you can run, you can steal bases, you can steal runs. He is a five-tool player in my opinion. I know he doesn't have the most power, but he just seems to play a lot better. If I didn't have a lot of these guys higher up in the rankings, I would be using Lou Brock, and I actually had Lou Brock in my starting lineup for quite some time. Never really tried him out in ranked, but I was trying to, look at my team, look at where they're headed in terms of how many lefties do I have, how many righties, how many switch hitters, how do I balance out my lineup, where do I play these guys to get the best, positions out of them, or at least the best attributes out of them at those respective positions. As we get into starting pitchers here, I do have Greg Maddux ranked at 11, Tom Seaver ranked at 8, Bob Gibson ranked at 7. We got Chris Sale and Kershaw in the mix in there. A lot of times the starting pitcher is ultimately dependent upon how good your opponent is and what their tendencies are and what they excel at in the game, right? Obviously, a person that has a tough time hitting an outlier fastball, you're going to probably want to go with like 7 of these pitchers out of the 10. If you're going up against someone who maybe has a tough time waiting back on the off-speed pitches on a harder difficulty, then maybe you want to go with Greg Maddux or someone with a little bit more control. You can spot up. You can kind of finesse your way to a victory. As we get into the relief pitchers, this is relief pitchers and closing pitchers. And with this list right here, I would say that this one probably has the most set 2 players out of any other position in terms of where I have these guys ranked right now. Only a few set 1 closing and relief pitchers in this list. A lot of good relievers recently. We got Mariano Rivera in the top 5. Goose Gossage, according to the Show Zone, is the highest meta overall closing pitcher, but I just think some of these other closing pitchers I have ranked ahead of him have a better pitch mix, maybe a better speed differential, or they have a little bit more of a deceptive motion. I think Aroldis Chapman could definitely be the best all-around pitcher in the entire game. A lot of people, I would say the average person, has an extremely difficult time hitting Aroldis Chapman. It's a combination of his windup and just how dominant and overpowering he can be. But as we get into the end of the list here, we're finishing off with some DHs. I really think these guys are interchangeable. These guys are players that I think you almost have to find a way into the lineup, but maybe players that I wouldn't really want to use out there in the outfield. You could probably add Frank Thomas to that list, and as of right this second, I'm using Stan Musial in my DH spot, who I think is a really good option there with 125 contact and reverse splits. But this is my current team. I sold Aroldis Chapman because I wanted to build up my stub count. I did purchase Joe Mauer. I also purchased Masataka Yoshida. But that's going to do it for this one. I'm College Lefty, and let me know what you think about my top 10 ranked cards at each position. Until next time, peace out.